Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Daily Devotions with Pastor Peter. I am Pastor Peter. And before you listen to this with your children, if you happen to do so, I would say listen to this first and then decide whether or not you want your children to watch this together. Anyways, let's read Genesis 38. This is what it says. About this time, Judah left home and moved to Adullam, where he stayed with a man named Hira. There he saw a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shua, and he married her. When he slept with her, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and he named the boy And then she became pregnant again and gave birth to another son, and she named him Onan. And then she gave birth to a third son. She named him Shelah. At the time of Shelah's birth, they were living in Kezib. In the course of time, Judah arranged for his firstborn son, to marry a young woman named Tamar. But was a wicked man in the Lord's sight, so the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to Er's brother Onan, "Go, marry Tamar, as our law requires of the brother of the man who has died. You must produce an heir for your brother." But Onan was not willing to have a child who would not be his own heir. So whenever he had intercourse with his wife's brother, he spilled the semen on the ground. This prevented her from having a child who would belong to his brother. But the Lord considered it evil for Onan to deny a child to his dead brother. So the Lord took Onan's life too. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Go back to your parents' home and remain a widow until my son Shelah is old enough to marry you." But Judah didn't really intend to do this because he was afraid Shelah would also die, like his two brothers. So Tamar went back to live in her father's home. Some years later, Judah's wife died. After the time of mourning was over, Judah and his friend Hira, the Adullamite, went up to Timnah to supervise the shearing of sheep. Someone told Tamar, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." Tamar was aware that Shelah had grown up, but no arrangements had been made for her to come and marry him. So she changed out of her widow's clothing, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, then she sat beside the road at the entrance to the village of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. Judah noticed her and thought she was a prostitute since she had covered her face. So he stopped and propositioned her. "Let me have sex with you," he said, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law. "How much will you pay to have sex with me?" Tamar asked. "I'll send you a young goat for my flock," Judah promised. "But what will you give me to guarantee that you will send the goat?" she asked. "What kind of guarantee do you want?" he replied. She answered, "Leave me your identification seal and its cord, and the walking stick you are carrying." So Judah gave them to her. Then he had intercourse with her, and she became pregnant. Afterwards she went back home, took off her veil, and put on her widow's clothing as usual. Later, Judah asked his friend Hira, the Adullamite, to take the young goat to the woman and to pick up the things he had given to her as his guarantee. But Hira couldn't find her. So he asked the men who lived there, "Where can I find the shrine prostitute who was sitting beside the road at the entrance to Elam?" "We've never had a shrine prostitute here," they replied. So Hira returned to Judah and told him, "I couldn't find her anywhere, and the men of the village claimed they've never had a shrine prostitute there." "Then let her keep the things I gave her," Judah said. "I sent the young goat as we agreed, but you couldn't find her. We'd be the laughingstock of the village if we went back again to look for her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has acted like a prostitute, and now, because of this, she's pregnant." "Bring her out and let her be burned," Judah demanded. But as they were taking her out to kill her, she sent this message to her father-in-law. These men who own these things made me pregnant. Look closely. Whose seal and cord and walking stick are these?" Judah recognized them immediately and said, "She is more righteous than I am, because I didn't arrange for her to marry my son Shelah." And Judah never slept with Tamar again. When the time came for Tamar to give birth, it was discovered that she was carrying twins. While she was in labor, one of the babies reached his hand out. The midwife grabbed it and tied a scarlet string around the child's wrist, announcing, "This one came out first." But then he pulled back his hand, and out came his brother. "What?" the midwife exclaimed. "How did you break out first?" So he was named Perez. Then the baby with the scarlet string on his wrist was born, and the name was Zerah. Yeah, one of those things. It's hard to say, but when you do something wrong. And I'm sure this is not the first time Judah did this, because he knew what he needed to do, and he was negotiating price and everything else too. Eventually, when you sin, it comes up and catches you if you continue down the same path. A simple story as that. The wickedness of Judah. I think came down to his sons. And the wickedness of his sons and what they were doing, God punished. And in this sense, God's allowing justice for her to get what she wants. Now, we look at Tamar and we say, well, she was a cruel person to do this. On one sense, yes, it wasn't the most right thing to do, but at the same time, widows at that time didn't have any other options, really. They didn't have anyone to take care of them. They didn't have a job. They didn't have livelihood, and they had to go back to her father's home. And Judah was not being fair in following the laws and the rules that were set up by his people, by his own understanding of what it should be. Not doing what is right has caused wrong things to come out of it. And I know this sounds like a broken record for me because I've said this over and over again, but I think the Bible makes it super clear for us that when we continue down a wrong path, eventually it will catch up to it. It might not catch up to us now, but it will catch up to us later on. My kids are playing a game online. I got addicted to it too, Nitro Type. I could type 120, I think the highest record I have was 123 words per minute at 97% accuracy. Not to brag or anything, even though I am. But they got me hooked on because I'm typing away and I'm probably beating all these little kids. But then my kids want to mimic me and try to type fast. And for those of us who are older and those of you who are in your 40s and 30s, AIM, ICQ, Yahoo Messenger, those things help me be the fast typer as I am today, because you're constantly trying to type. And back when I was a youth pastor, we would be chatting online and to different students and different people, and I would have like 10 screens open and chatting to everybody at once, and it's just kind of crazy that I was able to do that. I don't know if I can handle that now, but yeah, that's where my fast typing comes. My kids want to be like Dad, who types pretty fast, so what do? They start playing Nitro Type. But then the problem is they're not typing correctly. If you're typing, you have to type with your fingers in the right placement so that you can move everywhere where you need to move. Actually, a more effective typing method is the Dvorak version. I tempted to go that way, but no keyboard is actually laid out perfectly with the keys that way, so I'm sticking with QWERTY. But they skip steps and not learning the proper placements and where to use which keys for which fingers, and they're kind of just typing as fast as they can, as in like it's a game. And it is a game to get you typing faster, but when you're doing that, eventually what ends up happening is you won't be able to get past maybe 60 words a minute. Your actions, when you don't do things right at the beginning, will catch up with you later on. And something simple as typing shows us, as the lessons for us in our livelihoods every day, that when we cut corners, when we do things that are not correct, eventually it comes out. Now, what is it? An action yields a habit yields a lifestyle yields a destiny. Is that how it was? Action, habit, lifestyle. I think that's what it is. I thought there was one more. And that's the reality of it. We reap what we sow. We can't say that God's unfair in those situations, because really God, He gave us the ability to choose Him or to choose us. And the us part sometimes overpowers our abilities, and we choose what's not right. And I'm not saying this as a condemnation on anybody. Sexual sin is one of those things that grab you, by the neck. And if you're not careful, it can ruin you. And in this sense, everybody knows now that, hey, Judah wanted to burn this girl. And this girl came back and said, you know what? The guy who got me pregnant was him. I can imagine how everything came crashing down in that moment. Now everybody knows. That's Judah. But hey, what sins do we have in our lives that we need to have checked out? That we need to have reviewed? We all have something. But it's one of those things. We have to sit down, spend some time and think. If I continue down this path, where will it take me and everything that I am with it? Because if we're not careful, the worst is yet to come. How miserable is that? Anyways, I could go into more mistakes that we've made, more mistakes of the world and society. But as you can see, when we don't take care of things right away, when it breaks loose, there's no pulling it back. All right, my friends, take care. Have a good one. Pray hard. Seek God. and repent of your sins. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.